What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It's time for a review of album number 5 by metalcore titans Parkway Drive. This one is titled IRE, and it's the follow-up to 2012's album Deathless that I was actually a fan of. I wasn't thinking that it was spectacular or anything like that, but I had listened to this band in their early days because a lot of my friends were into Parkway Drive, and their first two albums just did nothing for me. In fact, I didn't check them out or come back to them in a while just because I had these preconceived notions, but I like how this band has evolved, what I've seen through the years after I've come back to them. Now, I don't spend a ton of time listening to metalcore, obviously you guys probably know that, just because I feel like there's just such a huge sea of generic metalcore albums that are just so cheesy that I can't even bear to give them like 2 or 3 listens. But with Parkway Drive's IRE, an album that a lot of you guys asked for me to review, I feel like I'm getting something more rewarding. There's a lot of songs on here that are absolutely punishing. I love how brutal the tracks like Dying to Believe are. It's just absolutely relentless. Like a wall of guitars kicking this thing off, and then of course Dedicated at the end of this album, just like a final punch before the final closing track, a Deathless song which feels like a tribute to Coheed and Cambria and sees them incorporating more of a progressive rock side. Parkway Drive caught my attention immediately with the opening track Destroyer, one that just definitely doesn't fuck around with its lead guitar. It's something that gets embedded in your head, just slices its way right in there, and I think there's so many songs that I've heard out there this year, even from hard rock bands, metalcore, you name it, there's just a lot that doesn't stand out, and I think Parkway Drive put a lot of work into writing creative guitar licks on this thing. Even tracks like Writings on the Wall, you can see that they put a lot of thought into. I mean, I'm a little disappointed that it wasn't their take on the new Bond theme as performed by Sam Smith, but at the same time, we get something really cool with it. It's something that has a lot of build, there's a lot of tension in that track, and then whenever it finally cuts loose, I don't know, it's just definitely a rewarding listen. It's something that pays off big time, and I feel like there's a lot of moments like this on that LP. I want to talk about a few of the singles on this album, starting with Bottom Feeder. I think that that's one that a lot of people are hyping up, a lot of people saying there's a cool instrumental on it, and I don't exactly disagree with that. It's just that the lyrical content feels very sterile to me, not really pushing any buttons. There's definitely a cool guitar solo on there, and that's something that I can say for a handful of the songs on this thing. I like that they threw those in there, and they didn't just feel absolutely just ridiculous. And some of the breakdowns on this thing are actually well-timed and well-executed, something that I can definitely give them props for. I like that they incorporated different styles and still had some really punishing and menacing aspects to the record. Crushed is another song on this record that just kind of towers over everything. It's got a thundering drum rhythm, and that's something that I can say for the track Destroyer as well. A lot of that double bass pedal action going on the track, and I can definitely really respect that. But of course on the track that I was just talking about, Crushed, I think that it's done in a really cool way. Reminds me of Psychosocial by Slipknot in a way, just because of a thundering drum rhythm, kind of a guitar slicing in and working its way surrounding the song, but at the same time I feel like the drums and the vocals are kind of the main aspects of a lot of that song. However, there are a handful of tracks on this record that definitely feel a little bit more middle of the road, don't really push any buttons or push any borders on this thing, and I think one of those would have to be Fractures, a track that is definitely driven by a very safe guitar lead on this track, and I think the screamed vocals just feel very, I don't know, metalcore-ish, and I don't really get down with that. I think The Sound of Violence falls into a similar shopping cart just because you don't want to take it all the way up to the checkout. You kind of like a few aspects about it, but you're not quite sold on it, and you end up leaving it somewhere in the store for one of the employees to collect. But for every 2 or 3 songs that I don't really care for on this record, there are 4 or 5 that I actually see myself coming back to in the future, and that's definitely spelling good things for Parkway Drive. There's great tracks like Destroyer that I mentioned having an insane guitar lead on that track. The track Crush that definitely mixes things up with its drum rhythms, and then even Writing on the Wall that gets a little bit experimental with its vocal approach and just kind of an attack and a release style. And then they show off some progressive rock tendencies on the closing track, a Deathless song, and even some great singles like Vice Grip that manages to be an anthem without being totally ridiculously cheesy. Parkway Drive's IRE is definitely worth your time. I recommend you check it out. For me personally, I'm going with a 5 out of 5. Suck my 5. 3.5 out of 5. 3.5 out of 5.